Uh, Okay, I don't know of any other announcements, but if anybody knows any that I need to announce, anybody? Okay. Anyway, comments again, bring something good to eat. Okay? Like to eat. All right, this is where we were last time. We were talking about the ram, you know, last time. It's all ram pushing westward and northward and southward, and we identified those again as being the Medes and Persian government. But we didn't have to define it. It was verse 20. It told us who it was. So no guesswork there. So here's where we are, verse 5. And I was considering, and as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes, and he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in fury of his power. And I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his power. Okay, so we got a goat. A goat that's got one horn, right, between his eyes, one horn, a one-horned goat. And this goat here, we had a clarification in verse 20 as to who the ram was. Now we got a clarification as to who this goat is in verse 21. It says, and the rough goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Well, we know that between Greece and Persia that there had been a long existing animosity between these two kingdoms, and I'll elaborate on that just a little bit more here later. But this notable horn is Alexander the Great, who at the age of 23 inherited the kingdom from Philip, his father. Now, Philip had wanted to combine all of the city-states of Greece and rebel against Medes and Persians and turn everything into a Grecian state, to Hellenize the whole kingdom. But he died before he could do that. And it says that he got this goat with a notable horn come from the west. Well, that's Greece to the west of Persia. So, and he touched not the ground. The conquest of Persia by the Greek kingdom was very fast. I mean, did you realize that in the 10 years that Alexander the Great conquered the whole world, the whole known world at that time? I mean, in 10 years. When he come against Persia, he wasn't dragging his feet. That's why he said he didn't touch the ground. That's how fast it was. And the Greeks, as I said before, there was a lot of animosity between the Greeks and Persia because the Persians had really inflicted a lot of pain on Greeks, and they're the ones that burned the city of Athens, and I mean they just really that's why Alexander the Great and his army come with such fury against Persia, was because they had over the years had built up quite a bit of an animosity between them. Okay, verse 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very, very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. So this goat waxed very great. In fact, like as I said, they conquered the known world. In fact, they made, well, maybe not the known world, but the Middle Eastern part of the world. The armies actually made it to India. And that's when his soldiers said, we're not going any further. You know, I guess if Alexander the Great had had his way, they'd have, gone on into China. But his army said, we're not going any further. And so they returned back to Babylon. That's where Alexander the Great was going to set up his capital, was in Babylon. The only thing is that, and by the way, he had also married, when he got back, he married Roxanne, the daughter of the Persian king that he had conquered. But anyway, when he got back and he wanted to make Babylon the capital, the problem was that he died. At 33 years old. Now, I put up here that he died of a fever. There's a lot of different opinions as to what he died of. Some say that he died of a venereal disease. Some said he died because of alcoholism. But we know that he died. Now, remember, he took the kingdom at 23 years old. He died at 33. In 10 years, he had achieved that height in the kingdom. And I know that some of this, if not all of it, we touched on back in chapter 2, and maybe chapter 7. But because chapter 8 is going over some of this again, we have to deal with it. I guess we don't have to, but we'll be dealing with it. After Alexander died, all of his generals, they fought over who was going to take over, and they did that for about 20 years. Struggled as to who, but only 4 ended up coming out ahead. And those were Cassander, and he took Macedonia and Greece. Lysimachus, he took Asia Minor and Thrace, and then Seleucus, he took Syria and the land east, including Babylonia, and then Ptolemy, he took Egypt, and sometimes he had Palestine, and sometimes he had parts of Arabia. So those are the 4 generals, and we touched on that before. I know you all remember all of that and everything, but we're just kind of rehashing it here, okay? Because it comes into play. Going to verse 9, and out of one of these 4, remember the horn, the great horn is broken, and out of that comes up these 4 horns, which we just named. Now it says, out of one of them came forth a little horn. Do y'all remember where in chapter 7 where it says the little horn come up? Mm-hmm. Come up out of the last kingdom, it says the little horn come up. And that's one of the points that we want to look at in chapter 8. We won't do it right now, but that's one of the points that we want to look at. And out of one of them came forth a little horn which waxed exceedingly great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. And the pleasant land, that's Israel. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. That's what Scripture says. So out of one of them, now, out of these four kingdoms, there are two kingdoms that kind of took control, that become really powerful. And that was the Ptolemies Seleucid kingdoms. And these were constantly locked in conflict over a little territory over there that we know as Israel. I mean, they were constantly fighting over Israel, you know. Have you ever wondered, I mean, sometimes it's amazing to me to just stop and think, right, how the world is so upset with a little plot of ground over there that's not bigger than what Maryland, I think it is, about this, and yet that has been a thorn in the flesh, in the sides of nation after nation after nation, and it's still a problem to everybody. Yeah. The UN has more, has adopted more, I guess you'd call them resolutions against Israel for them being a nation that is causing more problems in the world, you know. I mean, for some reason, they don't seem to have a problem with the Arabs or Palestinians or whatever, you know, but Israel. So, in fact, the matter is that one of the strange things happened the other day is that the representative from Israel was elected to be chair over what they call the Sixth Committee, which has to do with international law, that oversees international law, you know. And when they usually select a chair for that, it's usually done by acclamation, you know. Just everybody wants so and so to be chair. Just, you know, raise your hand or something. You know. But that wasn't that easy this time. The Arabs demanded a vote. And when they voted, it was overwhelmingly for this representative from Israel, which is the first time Israel had a guy that has sat on that committee, but which had nothing to do with this. It's just it was just something that I thought, oh, wow, you know, that's unusual. Okay, so we end up with these two here, and to me this is important. Because we have later on they're called the king of the north and the king of the south. I like to think that if I'm going to interpret Scripture, I like to think that I need to use Scripture to interpret Scripture. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that for a reason. The other day I heard one guy preaching on prophecy, and he said the king of the north is Russia. Well, that's not what this is saying here. It's saying the king of the north was the Seleucid kingdom, which controlled all of the area that was north of Israel. So I mean, I prefer to just let Scripture tell me who it is, and then later it's called king of the north. Anyway, that king of the south was Egypt. Later on, we'll see that as we go further into this. But anyway, we got these two kingdoms that come, and we'll see more about the conflict when we get to between these two. When we get to, here's the point that I want you to hold in mind as we're looking at chapter 8, is that God has seen fit to take the animals that we saw in chapter 7. And we define them in that. But he comes to chapter 8 and he selects two of these kingdoms and he elaborates on these kingdoms. And you've got to ask the question, why? Why is that he brings these other two kingdoms up again, you know? And we're going to look for some answers as we go through this. And some things we don't know, but we're going to See, made it white. All right. So now there comes forth the little horn. And this seems to, I think, I know that chapter 8 has a dual prophetic meaning. I know this because we're told in this chapter that it does. First of all, the one has to do with the rise of Antiochus Epiphanes, who reigned from 176 to 164 BC. And this prophecy seems to fit him also, but bear in mind it also has something to do with a future ruler. And we'll see it actually, we don't have to guess at that either. It's in the later part of the chapter, it tells us that. Okay? Now he gained control of the Seleucid kingdom, and he was some kind of ruler. He's a very good example of what the end time ruler will be like. Because of the way he acted. And he gained control of the land of Palestine, or land of Israel. And he waxed great even to the host of the heaven. We don't know exactly what that means. We could guess. In fact, if you go to, it could be that have to do with the fact that he sold the high priesthood of the Jewish temple. He just took the priesthood, the legitimate priest, and he displaced him and sold the priesthood for money. And it could have something to do with that. Or it could have something to do with what it says in Maccabees, the second Maccabees 9, verse 10. He said, and the man that, talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, it said, and the man that thought a little afore that he could reach the stars of heaven. In other words, what it's saying, his ego was so big, he thought that he was some kind of God, and that he could attain to, in some way, that he could command the stars of heaven. And here's another phrase. We don't know exactly what this means either, because it says, and it cast down some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground. We don't know exactly what that phrase is. In fact, the matter is, I think that the phrase is stated such that it has to do with the end time ruler. I think that he will have so much, he will be in demonic power that he will, that some of this applies. Yes, sir.
Was this the guy who slaughtered a pig on the altar?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he was the first abomination of desolation,
Right.
wasn't he? Yeah. Well, that maybe have something to do with that.
Right. See, he
He
wanted to Hellenize the Palestine or Israel. And there's a reason for that, because a little bit later here, I'm going to state it now, but we'll reiterate here in a little bit. But what it was is that the Ptolemy kingdom and the Seleucid kingdom have been just back and forth fighting, and he at one time had even conquered the Ptolemy kingdom. Conquered Egypt, but Rome was beginning to gain power, and he had a problem. Something come up in Egypt, and he took his army and went down there to bring them into subjection again. But Rome had moved in down there with their armies in alliance with Egypt, and the Roman general drew a line in the sand and said, you come any further, we're going to wipe you out. And he backed out. He turned and went back into Palestine. And he was thoroughly upset. And so what he wanted to do then, that's when everything began to go really, that was 171 BC, that's when everything began to really go wrong for Palestine, for Israel, for the Jews, for Judah there. Is because he thought that if he could Hellenize the Palestine, it would be a buffer zone between the kingdom, and it would help keep the Romans and the Egyptians back, you know. So that's when it really began to go south. But we don't know exactly what this phrase here means. We know that stars are pictured in the Bible sometimes as people. In fact, the descendants of Abraham were called stars in Genesis 15 and in Genesis 22. We know in the last chapter of the book of Daniel, in chapter 12, it refers to those that lead people to righteousness as stars that would shine. But again, we don't know exactly what that means, but I think it does have to do with the power that's going to be exhibited in the last days too, when the man of sin, the man of the perdition is revealed. And anyway, okay. All right. So there's the idea. He wanted to Hellenize Israel so as to make a buffer zone. And some of the some of the priesthood, some of the Levites, some of the Jewish leadership, they felt like, hey, it's okay. You know, it's okay. And they went along with it. The only ones that were in opposition was the Hasidim, which is the pious Jews. These are the Jews that wanted to obey the Torah and follow the laws and so forth. And in fact, that's when the Maccabees rose and set up the Maccabees kingdom. That was some of the people that wanted to follow the laws, that rebelled against Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, verse 11. Yea, we're talking about this little horn now. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down, and the place of his sanctuary, speaking of the sanctuary of the Lord, and a host, it means many people, the word means many people, and a host was given him against the daily sacrifices, and just a whole bunch of people went along with this, by reason of transgression, and it cast the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. You see, when he took over, he magnified himself, he gave himself a name. That last part, when we say Antiochus Epiphanes, that means he gave himself that last name, Epiphanes. It means God manifest. That's what he looked at. I think it's a pretty good example of what the man in the end time is going to think of himself. It's some kind of, in fact, there's going to be it's going to be a guy that joins ranks with him and going to build a statue and want everybody to worship that thing. He teaches himself to God. He thought himself was Zeus manifest in the flesh. Zeus was the sky and thunder god, and king of the gods in Greek mythology. And that's what a picture of what they thought. Somebody pictured. God of thunder, mighty God, that's what he thought he would look like. Anyway, and the Jews, they played on his words. They called him Epimanes, which means lunatic. So, and I know we've gone over this stuff in times past, but Anyway, let me finish this, at least the slide. So he called himself God, he exalted himself as God, against God, which is just exactly what it says that the man in the end will do, that the man of sin will do. By him, the daily sacrifices are taken away. I'm gonna have to stop because we got some things that are coming from the next group of slides here that are actually coming from another source. And so if I get too far, so I'm gonna stop right there, okay? All right, I know that this can be kind of boring, I know that. But in order to understand what what chapter 8 is trying to bring out, we have to look at who this guy is and what he is. And so, but remember, we got a little horn here, we had a little horn in chapter 7, but he showed the little horn in chapter 7 out of the last kingdom, which was Rome. Now it's showing a little horn coming out of the Seleucid kingdom. We're going to ask a question concerning that, which, so think about it. Are they one and the same, or are they different? Okay? I quit.